Hi everyone, let's get started slowly. So this is Dr. Erdem. He's associate professor in sociology at Koç University in Istanbul. And he's here to tell us about his project, some parts of his project. It's a huge project. I think if I'm not mistaken, the first ERC project in social science in Turkey, maybe?
Not in social sciences.
No? The title of this project is The New Politics of Welfare Towards an Emerging Market Welfare State Regime. And as you can see, it's a comparative study in different emerging states, emerging countries' welfare state regimes. So please help me welcome and then Yörük to talk to you about.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be here, and it's an honor, really an honor to be at Kubbealti and to be with you. And I'm looking forward to all of your criticisms and questions and comments. And this is an ongoing project, and we are just in the middle of the project. And that would be great to hear all kinds of comments to improve our rest of the project. As Antoine said, yes, this is a project that I was awarded 2.5 years ago, and it's a 5 years project. And we basically investigate the politics of contemporary welfare state development in emerging market economies. And in this talk, I would like to introduce you with the content of this project and its methodology, and then I will present some of its results by talking about a number of case countries, including Brazil, China, India, South Africa, Mexico, and Turkey. This project is titled Emerging Welfare, and it's a multi-method and interdisciplinary comparative welfare research project. We are building separate data sets for welfare state, welfare indicators, and political protest, or we can call it contentious politics. And we employ quantitative, computational, qualitative, and all comparative and historical methods to explain the politics behind the recent welfare state development in these select emerging markets. The starting point is that during the neoliberal period, the countries in question have developed very extensive social welfare programs. They have enlarged their existing social security programs that target formal sector workers and civil servants. And they have also introduced generous social assistance benefits for the poor. And our Yeşil Card program, Green Card program is one example of this. Or you can also mention the Bolsa Família in Brazil, Enrega in India, or Dibao in China. So these are all huge social assistance programs. And our project is based on the idea that welfare development in emerging markets is not only a quantitative expansion, but also it corresponds to a qualitative shift in the history of the welfare state. The project is structured around two main questions. The first question, are we observing a new global welfare state regime structure as a result of this welfare state expansion in emerging markets? And the second question, if this is the case, if there is a new welfare state regime in emerging markets, what is the cause of this development? And specifically, what is the role of contentious politics? Our project's first contribution is hopefully in the huge welfare regime literature. I'm sure you are familiar with the work of Costa Esping Anderson and the literature on the welfare regimes. He wrote a book in 1990 and classifying welfare state families in the Western world into social democratic, corporatist, and liberal welfare state typologies. And this is a groundbreaking work. It has been cited almost 40,000 times since its publication. Since then, the literature, there are a lot of people, the literature has created a race to discover new regime types. But it has radically slanted towards Western or OECD countries in case selection, while mostly ignoring the rest of the world. The Global South has been mostly ignored in this huge literature. There are only a few expansionist scholars who believe in the global coverage of this welfare regime perspective, but still, most of these expansionist scholars have only looked at the Global South, comparing the countries within the Global South, and without conducting comparative research that will include both Global South and the North. Also, these existing expansionist scholars have mostly identified geographically based clusters of states, such as East Asian welfare regime, Latin American welfare regime, East European welfare regime, and without considering the possibility that geographically, culturally, or historically distant countries are converging into a new welfare state regime as a result of shared political dynamics. Because in 1990s, King Anderson argued that Scandinavian countries are in the same family because of the same political factors. It was because of the political power of the formal working class based on this theory of power resources theory and democratic class struggle. So there might be different sets of political factors that are converging separate distant countries into similar single welfare state regimes. This is a possibility. And our research aims to take that possibility into consideration. In addition, due to data limitations, these expansionist scholars, as you see, I'm mostly criticizing those people who are looking at the Global South, trying to analyze welfare regimes in the Global South. And these people have oftentimes failed to use real welfare policy variables, but instead they have utilized developmental variables as a proxy. Let me give you an example. Espen Andersen and those lot of people who work on the West, they have used real welfare policy variables such as replacement rate in old expansion. What percentage of your latest salary are you getting when you get retired, for example? This is a measure of welfare state effort. But in the Global South, in this kind of analysis, people are mostly using, for example, Gini coefficient or the poverty rate of poverty, to classify countries. But I see that these are not measuring the welfare state, but these are measuring the level of development in these countries. And these studies are confusing, therefore, welfare and developmental studies. So, and this has created a huge validity problems in the entire literature. So, all of these shortcomings of the literature have undermined the possibility of reaching a global welfare regime theory. And we are trying to help overcome this issue by broadening the geographical, theoretical, and empirical scope of the literature. The second contribution of our project is hopefully to the literature on contemporary welfare state development. This literature, it tries to explain welfare state development. It's a causal, mostly a causal analysis literature. This literature, especially again in the non-West, has been largely dominated by what I call structuralist arguments. Meaning, and particularly, they have ignored political factors. This dominant structuralist paradigm is trying to explain the huge social assistance expansions in this country. But they have emphasized demographic and economic changes and argues that this welfare state reform is essentially almost a natural result of aging, labor informalization, unemployment, globalization, deindustrialization, rise of poverty, or the rise of services. As if governments are expanding social assistance programs to alleviate poverty, to help the poor, or to resolve some demographic or economic difficulties. without considering the possibility that contentious politics or electoral competition are critical forces behind this huge expansion. And I'm basically borrowing this perspective from an older generation of welfare scholars, including S.P. Anderson, who explained the mid-20th century welfare state development by looking at the communist threat, or the working class militancy in the West, or electoral competition or intra-elite competition in the West, as factors behind, as the main drivers of the rise of the modern welfare state. So these factors have almost been ignored or forgotten in the literature. So therefore, I'm trying to challenge this paradigm and investigate the political causes of welfare system changes that recently take place in emerging markets. Specifically, I look at the effect of political competition and social movements on welfare state development by focusing mainly on the politics of the poor as a dual source of political threat and support for the elites in these countries. What I mean is, and you will be quite familiar with this argument since we are all living in Turkey. So, the current Turkish government or the previous Brazilian government, the Workers' Party, they are coming from very different ideological positions, but there is a shared dynamic in these two governing styles. They both rely on the support from the poor. And their, almost all statistics show that their voting level is negatively associated with income levels. So they are mostly getting their support and votes from the poor people, and independently of their ideological positions. And they have, in order to attain this support or sustain this support, what I argue is they have expanded huge social assistance programs such as the green card or conditional cash transfers, etc. So this is a very basic argumentation behind this project. So, therefore, I have basically two. Therefore, arguments. The first is that emerging markets are forming a new welfare state regime, and the second argument is that it is because of the politics of the poor we are seeing this new development. So, we are employing 4 different work packages to test these hypotheses. The first work package, in the first work package, we are building a huge welfare state data set. And we give a name to this data set, Global Welfare Data Set. And for the last 2.5 years, we have been working extensively to collect welfare state, real, genuine welfare state indicators from the global south. First, we used international sources like IMF, World Bank, ILO, etc. Then we contact local or national statistical authorities in India, China, all of these countries. And if the data is still missing, we want to calculate these indicators on the basis of these mainstream definitions of social policy. Therefore, we have built this data set on 52 countries for the last 40 years, for over 300 variables, and the data set is ready, so we are finalizing the website, and I hopefully will let you know about the link to this website when we launch it. So, using this data set, we are conducting a cluster analysis, and we are basically using the 3 main types of cluster analysis. Let me tell you what cluster analysis is. You have a certain number of data points and you classify, the algorithm classifies these cases according to their similarity and difference. We are using the 3 main, the most state-of-the-art methods of clustering, hierarchical, model-based, and k-means cluster analysis. And I can go back over these technical methodological details, but we are basically measuring all that: sickness, unemployment, social assistance, and healthcare. And social assistance has never being used as a welfare state clustering variable in this literature. In a parenthesis, S.P. Anderson himself has considered social assistance in his analysis of social stratification. Means-tested social assistance is stratifying the society, not decommodifying. He didn't consider the decommodification effect of social assistance, and here we are taking this into account because I argue in these countries, like in Brazil, China, India, Turkey, social assistance has a decommodifying effect as well. Limited, but certainly it has an effect. Because on average, a poor family in Turkey currently is in kind and in cash. The total value of social assistance in average is almost equal to 2/3 of the minimum wage. And so this corresponds to a decommodification effect. And we are measuring welfare generosity and state efforts. And so these are the details of varieties and the preliminary results. So, out of these 52 countries, we have observed 4 different clusters of state. The first cluster stretches from Argentina to Ukraine, and it includes Latin American countries, post-communist countries, and India, and China, and Turkey, and interestingly, 2 of southern European countries, Greece and Portugal. These countries have always been considered part of this southern European or Mediterranean welfare state regime since the work of Ferreira, since the 1990s. They have been classified together with Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Greece. This picture shows us that from a smaller perspective, they cluster with these other Mediterranean countries, but from a larger perspective, we see that Greece and Portugal are more similar to India and China than France and Germany, for example. And the second cluster is basically European countries, and it includes southern social democratic, liberal, and corporatist countries. The third cluster, it consists of less developed emerging market countries, and the last cluster is Indonesia, Israel, Korea, Malaysia, and the United States. This is a quite puzzling combination of countries. And we are trying to give meaning to these clusters of states because clustering, I will never do again the cluster analysis. The most difficult and the chaotic analysis I have ever done. It's really chaotic in the real technical sense because if you change the inputs a little bit, the results change so incredibly. And therefore, we have been working extensively and million times on these different cluster models to get a robust result. And so we will be submitting this paper soon, and this is quite a robust result. So since we have used this model-based and hierarchical and K-means cluster methods, they all converge into the same case countries, clusters of states, except for 1 or 2 countries. So the first cluster, so what characterizes these countries? The first cluster, the real emerging market cluster, we haven't given names to them, but we have to. So they have above average social security benefits, like old age pension, unemployment, and sickness benefits. Because these countries have developed semi-corporatist, fragmented and semi-corporatist welfare states since the national developmentalist period as a result of economic development and the growth of formal working class militants in the 1960s and 70s. So on the top of this semi-corporatist welfare development, since the 1990s, these countries are developing these huge social assistance programs. Therefore, they are catching up with the West in social assistance, and it is the first time that they have reached almost close to universal social welfare benefits. In Turkey, for example, almost over 80% of the population are now covered in one form of social welfare benefit, and this is a quite unique or recent phenomenon. Most of this population had been excluded from the welfare state until recently. And this is the same story everywhere. And the European countries, they are performing above average in all respects. And the last two clusters, so they are performing poorly, but they cluster together mainly because they are missing one or two of main social assistance, main social welfare components. They don't, for example, the last cluster, they don't have sickness benefits. Or the third cluster, they don't have an unemployment insurance. So they are performing below average in all respects, and in addition, they are lacking certain social welfare programs. Yes. So now I'm talking about the most challenging part of this project. So our second hypothesis was that this social welfare development or social assistance expansion is mostly because of the politics of the poor. And contentious politics is a huge component of this political power. The poor in these countries, the people from Varosh areas, the people of favelas, they have become the main grassroots threat for the governments. They have mostly replaced the old formal working class and trade union movement that were active in strike movement. So the center of grassroots activism has shifted from the formal working class to this informal proletariat. This is one of the main hypotheses. And in order to test this hypothesis in a quantitative way, we needed some empirical data, quantitative data. And data on social unrest did not exist for these countries. We only have strike statistics from the government, but basically we don't have it. So we took on this task to create social unrest data set for these select 6 countries, and using news archives and creating protest data sets from news resources, news articles, as a long history from the work of Charles Tilly. You know that newspapers are really good sources, or the best available source for social movement. But this literature or this scholarship has mostly used manual methods, and this is what I myself did for my PhD dissertation. I created the welfare state protest data set for Turkey between 1970 to now, until now, manually. So I sit down in the Boğaziçi library and look at this microfilm machine from memory from movies, and it took me for more than a year, and with the support from all friends and colleagues and relatives. So you can only do one newspaper with this huge labor force. So we are basically using automated methods to extract protest information from online news sources in this work. We are using natural language processing, machine learning, and artificial intelligence methods to classify and extract information from local news archives in India, China, and all these countries. How do we do this? The algorithm has 2 parts, classification and extraction part. Let me quickly tell you how artificial or machine learning works here. So the machine learns from people, real human beings, how to understand or how to extract information from text. Therefore, we have a team of human annotators. They read and annotate and tag thousands of news articles. And we use this huge corpus to train our machine learning algorithms, and the machine learns how to extract this and implements the same thing to the rest of multiple millions of articles and create the data set. The classification, we have two parts of this algorithm, classification part. First, we identify which news articles contain information on political process. And in the second part, among these classified articles, then we extract information on the type of the protest, participants, organizers, violent or non-violent, urban or rural, ideology, ethnicity, caste, religion, place, time. So we are actually trying to extract all this necessary information in an automatic way. So there are some existing semi or fully automated systems to create this kind of information. They are mostly based in the United States or in Europe. They are mostly funded by the American Department of Defense, because they are trying to identify terrorist events and predict them. But still, they have a lot of, let alone their philosophical or practical usages, they also suffer in methodological terms, because this data sets, basically they are using mostly keyword-based search algorithms. So you create a list of keywords that would happen in, that you estimate to happen in protest-related news. But obviously you inevitably exclude many events, and this is really hard to replicate. So there is a reliability problem in this existing literature, and there is a huge validity problem, because in this training data set, you have to create a really good gold standard annotation corpus, which means, so in our annotation team, each article, each news article is read and annotated by two annotators. And there should be a really high, over 90% inter-annotator agreement. And this inter-annotator level of inter-annotator agreement is the theoretical maximum of the performance of the machine learning algorithm. Therefore, you have to train your annotators so well, and you have to tell them what is about the social movements in India, in China, in Brazil, and also in terms of this computational linguistics. And in addition to that, you have to do adjudication or correction of the disagreements between annotators. If you do this, you create a gold standard corpus, and you are good to go. And the existing literature does not have this, and we are trying to work with the gold standard corpus. This is a technical detail. So we start with the news articles, and in task one, so we identify protest-related news, and then we identify which sentences talk about this event. And then from this sentence, we identify event participant and place and time and other characteristics of the event. I already talked about that, the corpus that we are creating, and I can talk about, if you have questions, on the more technical methods that we are using. So we are, as I said, we are using local language sources. For China, India, South Africa, we do this in English, and for Brazil and Mexico, we use Portuguese and Spanish. So this will be a generalizable machine learning system, cross-country and cross-language generalizable algorithm. So, yeah, so for example, for India, we have downloaded more than 10 million news articles from 3 major news sources, and we annotated 12,000 of them. And so we have bad performance in the classification. This is the easiest part. So the performance is over 90%, which means so by 94%, so we are able to find, locate protest events in this sample, in this archive. Okay, in the third work package, so what time is it? Yeah, I have 10, 15 minutes. Okay. In the third work package, so we are using this protest data set, welfare data set, existing surveys and administrative statistics to test our main hypothesis. So this is a highly quantitative work package. We are basically trying to establish statistically significant and possibly, preferably, causal relationships between political variables and social welfare provision. And in the fourth work package, we are doing extensive qualitative analysis because quantitative analysis in itself is nothing. It tells you some correlations, but you have to flesh it out by using real documents, and to create a narrative you need qualitative analysis. And we survey all parliamentary proceedings and official reports and news archives in these countries to understand the extent to which policymakers, MPs, government members are considering grassroots or contentious politics in welfare policy making. So, now I will try to give you some examples from what we have found so far. It seems that we have captured a pattern. Wherever we look at, so we see that governments are directing the social assistance programs to contentious groups. This could be protesters, this could be ethnic groups, this could be landless workers. But this pattern is almost a universal thing when we look at emerging market economies. What explains this growth of social assistance programs in neoliberal period, which is oftentimes expected to undermine welfare provision? The classical narrative says neoliberalism undermines the welfare state, but the puzzle is that the largest welfare state development happened in these countries in the neoliberal period. So, what explains that? And I'm basically relying on the work of Francis Fox Pillow. They wrote in the 1970s, they published a huge groundbreaking work. They explained the rise of social assistance programs in the United States as containment strategies against black rights and poor African Americans. And they argued that when there is unrest, governments expand social assistance. When the unrest comes to an end, social assistance contracts and takes a stigmatizing character. And in the stigmatizing form, it functions to regulate the labor market. So this is an old theory. And I'm trying to, I'm not trying to caricaturize my own argument, but it's, I think, safe to say that I'm just trying to test this hypothesis at the global level. Frances Fox Pillow, I met her when I was doing my PhD. She came to visit our department, and I had this meeting, and she's such a nice person, and basically she gave this idea in 2010. So at that point I was trying to, I wrote my PhD dissertation on the politics of welfare in Turkey, and I was planning to compare Turkey with other southern European welfare states, because this is what we learned from Ayşe Hoca, Çağlar Hoca. The Turkish welfare state is possibly part of the southern Mediterranean rim. But given told me that, okay, this might be true, but when you look at the global, from a global perspective, Turkey really looks like Brazil and China, because there is really big contentious conflicts in these countries, and there are huge social assistance programs. And she told me, okay, boy, go and explore this because this is empty. So, and sometimes you need that kind of wisdom from big names, and because I wasn't able to think about that. So, and since then, I am basically trying to pursue this wisdom. And then I developed this question, then what is the relationship between contentious politics and welfare provision? And the hypothesis is that governments in these countries expand social assistance not when or where people are poor, but rather when or where the poor become radicalized or politicized. I'm not arguing that poverty is not important or structural factors are not important, but they are important to the extent that they are translated into political dynamics. So politics in the end rules. We have a number of analyses. I will try to share with you quickly. Please forgive me with the load of tables, and I can turn back to the details of analysis in the end of all questions, but let me just briefly talk about them. We run a global analysis, a panel data analysis, and over 57 for 57 countries. Here are dependent variables social assistance coverage in this global sample, and we look at the effect of violent social unrest and riots. And in all these models, we consistently find that riots have a really significant and sizable effect on social assistance coverage. And controlling for all factors that have been mentioned in this literature. And we have also found that there is a positive effect of ethnic fractionalization and civil wars that can also be considered as part of contention, political contention. And there is no significant effect of democracy and election here. This is surprising because the literature tends to argue that these social assistance programs are also maybe partly a result of the third wave of democratization. But the global picture shows that democratization itself doesn't lead to anything. And the riots have an effect. The effect of riots is driven mainly by these emerging markets. This effect is not really strong in the West. And this might be a reason why scholars in the West have ignored these contentious political facts, because it doesn't exist today. Then we look at India. So what is the main conflict in India? India is almost a civil war. So if you look at, please go and look at Indian newspapers. Every day there are dozens of people being killed. And it's a huge country, but there are protests, armed conflicts, unrest, revolts every day. But the main conflict, the structured conflict, is between the Maoists and the Indian state, the Naxalite movement. And we look at the effect of Naxalite movement on the NREGA social, NREGA welfare program. This is a huge program that covers hundreds of millions of people, and this is the largest welfare program in India. So we use different data sets. There is a Maoist conflict data set, and this is our main independent variable, and we use a huge survey, existing survey, and we merged this survey and the Maoist US data set at the district level and run our analysis. So the results show that, again, these Maoist incidents have a sizable and consistent and significant effect across all specifications. Coefficient of violence, Maoist violence, is highly significant and sizable. In an average district with positive incidences, Naxalite violence leads to 10% income boost, but in a maximum violence district, this boost could go up to almost 200%. It's doubling. If you are living in the maximum Naxalite, most Maoist district in India, then your chances of getting NREGA is double. So we are controlling for all the most relevant we control variables. Then we look at Mexico. Mexico has a picture which is quite similar to Turkey. In 2013, I published an article from my dissertation where I show that Green Card program in Turkey, the Yeşil Card program, is disproportionately targeted at Kurds. And I argued that the government was trying to use social assistance, this social assistance program, to contain the Kurdish unrest. And we checked a similar hypothesis in Mexico, and we look at the effect of indigenous unrest. So the Zapatistas, famous Zapatistas. And our results show that being indigenous is very highly and sizably and significantly related to higher chances of getting famous oportunidades or Prospera social assistance programs and conditional cash transfer program. And we have just published this work in a local journal. And in South Africa, the picture is a little bit more complicated. This is an article coming out from governance, and again, we use microdata, survey data, and the results show that. So there is this child support grant, huge social assistance program covering 1/4 of South African population. Huge program. And there are two groups of people who are receiving much more social assistance. Those governing party supporters who do not participate in protests, or non-government supporters who participate in protests. So these people are much more likely to receive. It seems that the government is rewarding either full loyalty or full opposition. If you are in between, if you are a government supporter and joining protests, government does not care about you as much as they do for the other groups. But if you are really loyal, if you are supporting the government, and if you are living in a non-protest area, then the government possibly is trying to keep you loyal as much as possible. Or if you are in the fully opposite side, if you are threatening the government and if you are voting for the opposition party, then the government is possibly trying to contain you as a real threat. And in Brazil, so this is an ongoing work, and by the way, I forgot to name my co-authors, but as you see, we are writing this with Braquia and Contentious. In Brazil, we look at the effect of the MST movement, the landless people's, landless workers movement. This is a huge and very famous peasant movement, and they occupy land and they basically demand land reform in this country. And again, we look at the effect of these occupations, land invasions, on the Bolsa Familia program. And Bolsa Familia covers 50 million people in Brazil. Again, 1/4 of the Brazilian population. It's a huge program. And the results shows really interesting findings. First of all, land invasions, again, not surprisingly anymore, they have a positive and significant effect on Bolsa Familia. If you are if you are living in a municipality where there are higher numbers of land occupations, then your chances of getting and the number of people covered in Bolsa Familia is much higher. Government is using this as a containment strategy. But more importantly, if there are, we look at the interaction effect of invasions and land reforms, and also the individual effect of land reforms on Bolsa Familia. And they are both statistically significantly negative effects. Which means, if, and we interpret this as such, if there are, the movement is occupying land, what do they demand? Land reform. And if there are more land reforms, there are less Bolsa Familia. And we also show that if there are more Bolsa Familia, there are less land reform. It seems that government is using Bolsa Familia to unmake the claims of the movement itself. The movement does something to demand something, and the government is giving Bolsa Familia to stop people from demanding their claim, demanding item. So, land invasions have consistently positive effect on the program, and as I said, land reforms and interaction term has a negative impact. And in China, our results, again, we are using administrative data on Dibao. This is a huge, again, in China everything is huge, but a huge social assistance program, and we look at the effect of protest. And we look at rural China, and we classify rural protests into two parts: those that are faced with repression, government repression, or not. If government represses a protest or not. And there is a negative and significant relationship between repression and Dibao provision. If government is repressing the movement, they are also punishing them by giving less social assistance. This is a more tricky, this is really a preliminary work. We are still trying to make sense of how to interpret this result. And in Turkey, as I said, I have already shown this Kurdish social assistance nexus, but we are working in Turkey on more social security benefits, and these are quite preliminary results, but we try to understand the temporal development of minimum wage, average wage, and some social assistance benefits, and we try to understand the effect of strikes, labor unions. This is basically standard Marxist hypothesis. If strikes are leading to higher social welfare benefits or better conditions for workers, if there might be two mechanisms behind that, either there are this democratic class struggle arguments or power resources theory type arguments. People are demanding better benefits for this, they do strikes and they get these benefits. This is one way. Or people are striking for some more radical things, like in the 1970s Turkey, and governments give them some concessions in order to contain this radicalization. So there might be two different paths. But in the end, we observe that there is a positive relationship between strike movements and real minimum wage in Turkey between 1965 and 2030. So this is data from the last 50 years. So this has been argued by many people, infinite number of them. I quoted Borata, Eric Gell, and they have always, we always talk about this, but it was good to see that this is empirically also supported. And there is again a positive correlation between industry wage and strike activities. There is a negative but not significant, slightly insignificant relationship between working hours and strike levels. You would expect this. If there are more strikes, if the working class is more powerful, then they work less in a week. We are trying to get the old age pension levels, but interestingly, I'm really looking for help in this matter. So you live in Ankara, maybe you have better connections, but the Turkish government seems to not to disclose, maybe they really don't have this data, about the monthly levels of old age pension in this country. They don't know. This data doesn't exist, and so we are really struggling a lot to complete this time series, because we try to understand if higher numbers of strikes are leading to higher, more generous old age pension levels. Yes, I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Excuse me for this really loaded presentation. I'm sure it's difficult to follow, but since I'm at Opti, I just wanted to share everything.